Good morning. Welcome to Cooking with Gary. Some of you might have thought we were cooking something else, but we made a last-minute change a couple of weeks ago when Lori and I talked that we missed getting a chance to do this due to the cancellation of a class, and we thought we'd bring it back. The reason I chose this recipe and the reason I think it's a fun recipe to do is it's very simple. It's kind of elegant, and it allows you, if you will, to make this recipe ahead of time, put it in the refrigerator. Sunday brunch, Saturday morning, you got some friends or guests, or you're trying to provide someone with a fun special meal. This allows you to do just that. So it's called French toast casserole, and the recipe I gave you is pretty easy. Some of the recipes call for 5 eggs, some call for 6, some call for 7. But that's the basis, along with the bread, that makes up this casserole. I usually go ahead and make it ahead of the night before or before my guests get here. That way I can either cook something else or I can sit down and enjoy my guests while the oven warms up and we're about ready to eat this French toast casserole. Most people like French toast. It's one of my favorite things as a kid growing up, and I really enjoy it, and I think this recipe makes it fairly simple. In the recipe, it does call for day-old French bread. I have a tendency to change recipes. That's kind of my prerogative. But when I do, I change it because I think it enhances the recipe. So today you're going to see I'm using ciabatta bread. Why ciabatta over some of the others that are out there, since the recipe calls for French? You can use any bread that you like. Ciabatta bread has become one of my favorites. Sometimes I can't always get it at Kroger. Sometimes I have to go to Panera. So a couple of days ago, I went to Panera and I went through the drive-thru. And the nice young lady says, "How can I help you?" I said, "I need a couple loaves of ciabatta bread." And she goes, "Let me see if we have some." Comes back and she says, "We've got some." I said, "Great." She said, "The problem is, I hope you're okay, it's already been sliced." Well, that's fine because this recipe allows you to basically take it and break it down. So what you're going to see is a loaf that's already broken down. They've cut it. I'm going to chip it up to make the casserole. But you can get ciabatta bread if you like, or French bread, or any bread, white bread, wheat bread. I wouldn't make it with rye, but any of the others that you want. And I think you'll find it to be an enjoyable, thanks, Scott. I think you'll enjoy whatever bread you like or whatever bread you have. I think you're also going to find is that you kind of go, well, why do I want to use day-old bread? The reason the recipe calls for that, I bought this on Wednesday, and it's still in great shape, but it's a little stiffer. The reason you want it stiffer is that when you put the custard egg into the casserole, you want it to hold up to the custard or the egg mixture with cream and milk. So that's why day-old bread works great in this recipe. Kind of like making banana nut bread. If you have some old bananas, great way to use old bananas. Old bread or day-old bread, bagels, great way to take that and make this simple French toast casserole. So let me run through the recipe. I don't think you have it yet. Is that correct, Brenda? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay. So with the recipe, I'm going to run through it, and then I'll take you through each of the steps, and then we'll conclude with questions. So you have really 2 major portions of this recipe. The first part is the actual French toast and custard body of the casserole. The second part is the topping. Now, one of the reasons I chose this recipe over some of the others is I think the adding of the topping is an enhancement. It's like when you make an apple bread or an apple pie, and you just have a plain apple pie. Well, there's not many things better than a fresh apple pie out of the oven. However, I think an apple pie takes it to the next level, or a blueberry pie takes it to the next level when you put a crumble on top. It's just an added ingredient, an added texture to your recipe, and I think you and your guests will appreciate when you put this topping on. And I'm going to add one other element to it that you don't see on the written recipe that was sent to you. So there's two parts. So let's talk about the first part. The first part is you want one loaf of day-old French bread, about 14 to 16 ounces. So a little bit of a pound, pound and a half. I chose to get 2 loaves. I think it'll work really well for this recipe. For some people, they'll take this loaf and they'll actually cut it with a knife. I'm going to just shred mine. I think you'll find it to be really easy when I do that. But I really like taking my recipe and putting it together with just breaking it up in my hand and then simply put it in the loaf pan. So what I'll do here is also talk about there are differences with recipes: 6 recipe egg, 5 recipe, 7. If you really like a custard, you'll really like putting in extra egg. The extra liquid will not make a huge difference, but you'll find that this recipe, that's the basis with the ciabatta bread or French bread that really makes this all come together. Just like when you make French toast in a skillet, you're making that skillet actually fry up that custard in the bread. This is doing it, baking it, and making it apart with a 6 egg. It calls for 2 different dairy products. The reason behind that is one is the basis for the custard, which is the milk, but to enhance the casserole, I think it's really nice that they also added some half and half. If you don't have half and half, you can use milk. If you have anything else dairy-wise that you prefer to use, some people might have, instead of half and half, they might have heavy cream or heavy whipping cream. That'd be fine. But in this recipe for today, I do have my combination of milk. I also have my combination of half and half. You'll also see an endorsement to Kroger products. Several of these are from my Kroger click list from on Monday. So you'll probably appreciate that as well. So does Kroger. I don't think they give me a discount. They are taking good care of me with my click list and getting all my groceries for my family. So after you've got the dairy product in there for the main ingredients, you also are going to look at a little bit of sweetness, sugar. And you'll see on the recipe it says C note. What it's basically saying to you there is if you want, you can cut back the sugar in the recipe. The recipe is kind of sweet already, but it does call for a half a cup of sugar. You can put in more or less, and this is ideal for your guests. So you're having this casserole, and everyone's sitting down having a nice meal, and some people like things sweeter. Some people don't like sugar at all. I'm not going to say this is a diabetic recipe, but I will say that you can use this recipe and lessen the sugar in it, and you'll be fine. The reason behind that is this French toast casserole is usually served not with butter, but with syrup. So get your favorite syrup out, your Aunt Jemima's, or if you like at our house, we really like pure syrup. There is a major difference between the two. So what I'll do oftentimes is get the syrup out, and that's how you make the sweetness better or worse in this product. Is you can always add the sugar, less or more, and then the syrup will allow your guests to make the recipe or enhance the recipe they like. So the last two ingredients in this after the sugar are some of my favorites. I love vanilla extract, one of my favorites. I always have adequate amount of vanilla extract in my pantry. We use it for cooking. I use it in pancakes. Obviously, this French toast recipe, it is really an enhancer, if you will, in the way it takes recipes, particularly if you have what I call pure vanilla extract. You'll be able to tell the difference when you go to the store. It'll be a little bit more, but I think it's worth the extra money you pay for the original pure vanilla versus using imitation vanilla extract. Last thing is cinnamon. There are two cinnamons that I use. One cinnamon is Saigon cinnamon. The reason I use that is it's my go-to everything cinnamon. I use a lot of cinnamon every day in my recipes. But in this recipe, one of the things I also like when I bake is using Vietnamese cinnamon. Now, here's the difference. The Vietnamese is a little harder to get. And what I have found is those bakers that are baking on a high end oftentimes use Vietnamese cinnamon versus American or Saigon cinnamon. It's just a better grade of cinnamon. And if you're making it for friends and guests, I think it's a good little extra. So let's take a look at what I've done so far. So first I sprayed the glass pan. Now, I like to use glass pans in this recipe. It sits nice in the refrigerator. I think it does well, but I'm going to tip the camera down so you can see the shredded bread, and then I'll shred a little bit and show you what a loaf looks like when you get it from Kroger or Panera. All right, so hold on. There you go. So there is the shredded ciabatta. So I'm basically taking the loaf, shredding it up, putting it in. If you like, are you still there? All right, you just got shot out of my camera stand. So bear with me. Now, all right, we're back. Sorry about that, guys. I have this in a great overhead stand. It's got a spring load, and that spring load, one, it bites back. It really hits you. But two, sometimes in the camera stand, it kicks out. So in this case, it just did that. So should be able to see the ciabatta bread. Should be able to see what a loaf looks like. What the loaf looks like when you get it from the store like that. Just for fun and giggles, there's the visual. But all I do is you can cut this up or you can break it down like this. And as you can see, this 9-inch by 13 pan has got a loaf of ciabatta bread in, about a 16-ounce broken down ciabatta bread shredder. It really looks nice. I think, you know, when you look at it from the side, I probably got about an inch, inch and a half of loaf. And when you put that custard in there, it'll you know, soak it all up. And this is the basis for your recipe. After it sits and bakes in the oven for 20 minutes, what you'll find is it cuts real nice, kind of cuts almost like a pie or a cake, which I think is kind of nice. It serves up in little squares. You want, you can put some butter or syrup on the side, serve it with eggs, and I think you got a real nice casserole for your guests or whoever you're inviting over for breakfast. So what I first do is I take and I put some canola oil and I sprayed the pan. You can also do it with butter, whatever you prefer, to grease your 9.5 by 13 dish baking pan. This dish is fine if you don't put that oil greased in the baking pan, but I think it adds to keeping the dish all together, a nice little presentation when you're done cutting it. So I'm going to move the bread over to off the screen, and now we're going to move into making the custard, which is all egg based, and we'll go from there. You'll get a chance to watch me drop a couple eggs, a couple shells, which is always fun. But I set my bread aside. Don't worry about covering it. If it dries out a little bit, that's also fine. The reason I like that is it makes for a nice custard holding when you put it over top, even if it's stale a little bit. So we got 4 eggs. We need 6. You can do 7 if you like eggs more. You have extra eggs. So there we have our eggs into our toast. Can everyone see that? All right, good. So the eggs are in. They're ready to be a part of the recipe. So the next thing I do is I want to put my milk in. This calls for 2 cups of milk, which is the basis for the custard. So there's 1. There's 2. As you saw when I was doing that, it kind of swished over to the side. Don't worry about that. A little extra, a little less is not going to make a big difference in this recipe. The next thing is you want to do some half and half. Once again, a Kroger product, half and half. You can use Borden's, you can use Kroger, but you want to use 3/4 of a cup of half and half. So as you see, I have to use my other half and half because I ran out. So simple, moving into my next half and half to make 3/4 of a cup of half and half. And this half and half is really milk and whipping cream put together to make what most people put in their coffee, and we're going to use in this recipe here. So we got the milk, we've got the half and half, we've got our 6 eggs into the main ingredient of the custard. Now we want to put the vanilla. So here is my favorite vanilla. That's called pure vanilla extract. And if you smell it, you would appreciate, if you've ever been around somebody that likes to bake and you smell this when it's coming out of the oven. It's always a wonderful smell. I always appreciate vanilla extract when it's baking in my French toast or pancakes, or if I'm baking a pie or something like that. So here we want a tablespoon. Tablespoon's the bigger of the 2 teas. It's brown in color. I gotta tell you, it smells wonderful. That is a wonderful addition. So that's vanilla extract. So after the vanilla extract, now I want to add in a little bit of my cinnamon. I think cinnamon is great. These are the 2 cinnamons. This is from a nice spice shop that I go to. I can get it online. This is one of my other favorite stores you've heard many times, Costco. But I think you'll find that just doing a teaspoon of this, which is the smaller of the 2, is worth putting it in this recipe. I really think it makes a difference. So 1 level teaspoon. There's your powder. So there's the basis for your custard. If you want, you can also put in nutmeg. Now, when my kids used to like when I would make French toast, they always asked me what my secret ingredient was in my French toast, and it is nutmeg. Now, that's my handwritten nutmeg, but I like to put a little bit of nutmeg in this recipe. You might have nutmeg in your pantry. Smell it. If it smells good, then it's great. If you can't get much smell out of your nutmeg, then you know that it's aged. Now, using nutmeg nut and then using a simple microplane, you can add this taste and never worry about this going stale. Sometimes when it's already cut, you'll sometimes find that is a problem. But that's one of my fun tools. We'll make that today's class of the month tool called the Microplane. Simple to get online. It's basically a nice little tool to have in your cabinet for breaking down Parmesan cheese, nutmeg. I also do a couple Parmesan cheeses with it, but it's real refined and it really adds a lot of extra grading to your recipe. So there is your custard. So you got to break down the eggs. You got to mix it all up. I'm going to put a little sugar in here. My wife and I don't use as much sugar as we used to, so I'm not going to put a whole half a cup in there. Just going to put a little bit. That's what it calls for. But what you're trying to do here is make that fancy custard, which goes over the ciabatta bread that we've already broken down. You'll know that you've done all the eggs when the mixture turns a nice yellow cream color. Trying to get all the breakdown also of mixing in the cinnamon and also the nutmeg in the product. You'll know also that you're done mixing by the granulation of the sugar on the bottom. I put a little bit of sugar in there just so I knew, but there is our custard. Cool, that one. All right, so there's your custard. You can see the cinnamon and nutmeg coming to the top, which is actually how you want it. Now it's time to pour this over the French bread, regular day-old bread, or ciabatta bread. And you evenly want to distribute this so that all the pieces get a chance to have a little bit of this luscious custard. If you could hear right now, you could almost hear it sucking it up. It's always kind of nice because it's enhancing that custard right into that ciabatta bread to make sure that all the pieces get nicely covered, because you don't want a dry piece of bread with no custard on that, especially with those eggs, nutmeg, cinnamon, sugar. I'm going to ask my executive producer if she can hear me. Can you hear me? Can you see me? All right, so as you can see, all the bread has got that custard. It's just continuing to absorb. And it will, one of the things you let it sit in the refrigerator, get finished. So we've got that done. So let's move on to the topping. You're making a crumble now. I would not use the same bowl that you used for your custard. I would use another bowl. And in this bowl, you're going to make the topping that goes on. This goes on after you've let the ciabatta bread or French bread absorb the custard, and then you're ready to just about put it in the oven. So what we want to do is combine a half a cup of brown sugar. Just another little tip for you. one of my favorite ways to keep my brown sugar from getting stiff is I put it in a mason jar. Perfect little vessel to take it out of the big one, and then see how, I mean, it's just fresh and moist and ready to be added for the, whoa, a little bit extra, never hurt any. So there's a half a cup of your brown sugar. Then you want to put some flour. The one ingredient I don't have in front of me, so hold on. I'm back for a little flour. So there's a quarter cup of flour. I'm going to go back to your cinnamon. I'm going to use the big one on this. And then it's important to use cold butter. Cold butter cuts better. And when it's cold and it goes into the oven, cold butter, the water and butter evaporate. And that's what makes it flaky and crusty. So that's a good. Into my pantry, I go and I get my, and Kroger was nice enough when they gave this to me to mark it out with 3 tablespoons. So you got 1, 2, and 3. You just go ahead and cut through it. And it says to make chunks that go into the mix. And this is your topping. I'm going to cube it again. You want those little bursts of butter and that topping to burst open. This is good and cold. It will do its magic when it gets into the all right, so I'm going to go ahead and mix the ingredients together before I put the butter in. So you put the butter in, and it's going to resemble a crumble that if you've ever baked and made an apple pie or a blueberry pie crumble, that's exactly what you're doing here. You're just incorporating that in, making it a part of the mixture. All right, so we're almost done here. So what you want to do now, brush yourself off, and then after you get that is you want, you can put a little nutmeg in this too. Once again, using the microplane and a little nutmeg nut, literally a nut like an acorn. It looks like that enhances and adds to the flavor. All right, so right now we'll go ahead and cover the mixture, which is this right here. And as you can't tell, but for the most part, the custard is really done a nice job of incorporating itself into the ciabatta bread. So that's the basis of your recipe. So we are done. Ready for questions?